So what is on our minds today on Life Talks? We're going to have a fun episode where Dan gets to ask me questions, I get to ask Dan questions, and what's on our hearts and our minds. And
so are these spiritual issues? Are they political issues? Are they personal?
They could be. No, I think
so. It's just like a potpourri. Okay.
Because people want to know what goes on in that mind of yours, Dan. I mean, people really.
I don't even know what's going on in my mind half the time.
So I've got 3 questions for you, and these are fun questions. They're not. I'm not here to stump you. These are softballs today.
Yeah, and for the record, I have not read or seen them, nor have you read or seen the ones I'm getting ready to lob at you.
Nope. So do you want to? First of all, I'm Ben. You're Dan. We're the teaching pastors at Life Fellowship Church here in North Carolina, outside of Charlotte. And so, Dan, do you want to ask the first question?
You go first, because the second question will be dependent on what you ask me the first one.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you had $1 million to spend on missions,
oh my goodness,
where would you spend it? How would you spend it? Who would you give it to? I mean, someone writes you that says, Dan, I trust your judgment on missions. I trust your connections, your partnerships around the world. Mm-hmm. Here's $1 million. How do you spend it?
Yeah. So
I told you this would be fun.
Oh yeah, I'm jazzed. Make your check payable to Life Fellowship Designated Missions. And here's how I will spend that gift you're about to send us. Okay. First of all, I would not buy a single building or anything that uses fuel. No bricks, no mortars, no vehicles.
Okay.
Why? That's interesting.
Because they produce a disproportionate return on investment in the negative.
Why?
Because buildings, you build a building and it becomes, first of all, it sucks cash constantly. You have to maintain it.
Yeah.
You have to secure it. All kinds of things you have to do to keep it functioning. And so it's not just the purchase of a building, it's the long-term maintenance of it. And in third world countries in particular, which is where my interests are, that becomes a liability, a tremendous liability. You don't want them to become you don't want them to become long-term dependent upon American cash. That's why I only do partnerships, and I tell them up front, we're working together this many years, and after that, we stop.
Okay.
So I would spend it on training.
Training pastors.
Training nationals. And not just pastors. I'd train pastors.
Mm-hmm.
I would train discipleship leaders.
Mm-hmm.
I would train how to teach. And then also I would spend training on how to keep your families and your marriages strong for people in ministry.
Okay.
That's a huge problem in a lot of countries. So pastors do what pastors do, and they put the ministry above their family, and they've got frustrated wives and children, and it's not just in America. So those would be the 4 areas of training I would hit. And in addition, I may be interested in doing like a Bible school, a portable Bible school, seminary training basics, because a lot of them get their passion in front of their preparation. And so when they do that, they become vulnerable to things like prosperity gospel or hypercharismaticism, or just simply poor theology. So we need to make sure that they're trained in the Word of God.
Okay.
So that's what I would do.
Do you want to,
and I would do it in third world countries.
Okay. Like Asia, Africa.
Asia, Africa, and South America.
Okay.
I wouldn't do anything in Europe. I'm sorry, but
And you don't want to name names?
Countries?
No, like people that you would give it to, or no? That's too...
No, because I probably don't know them. If I had $1 million, I'd go looking for them. I would assume that if the Lord led $1 million to me, that He's also going to lead the leadership to me.
Okay. I mean, I think that those are great. I mean, I find it interesting, as someone who's an educator, trainer, that's what your heart is. Yeah. And so you've seen the value of that, and that's what you want to keep.
Yeah, and I see that as an element of discipleship. Discipleship is to get you on your feet spiritually, but it's also to use your spiritual gifts in the long term.
Okay. All right, that was my first question.
See, and I didn't have to think about that, because that's something I just believe in so much.
I want to start soft.
My next life, I'm going to do that full time. Do Christians believe in reincarnation?
All right, what's my question?
Oh, my turn.
Yes.
Okay. So that was kind of interesting. I'm going to ask a similar question I had written down. It was my 4th question, but I'm going to ask it.
Okay.
If you had 1 year off,
okay,
completely off, and money wasn't an object, you got a regular full salary. I'm not saying you got $1 million a year, but you got a full salary. How would you spend it?
Wow.
How would he or how should he? Which question?
Yeah, well, would and should.
All right, so I have a little bit of an experience. I was on a 3-month sabbatical, and the first month we just did absolutely nothing but hang out with family and that kind of thing. And after a month of that, you're like, I got to do something. So what I would do, I probably would take the first month and just do some traveling with my family. I mean, my kids are older now, so I'd have to, hopefully they would want to travel with me.
I wouldn't bet on that.
I think they would.
Yeah, your kids would. Most kids would. Your kids would.
But we would do a month of traveling. Just go somewhere, whether it's like West Coast or I'm a huge national park person. So like if I could just travel around, hit some national parks and a certain regional geography.
Any one that you haven't been to, that would be on your list for that year.
So I've got this trip planned. If I had 3 months to travel, and when it's warmer out, I would start from the Grand Tetons, move up to Yellowstone, and then go up to Glacier. I've just
that's so cool you said that, because those are the three that I would choose too. Those exact three.
That's on a bucket list trip for me to hit all
Maybe
three
you
of
and
those.
I should go together.
Let's do it.
Do you think our wives would mind?
Can we bring a camera crew? Podcast?
Ben and Dan visit the bison today.
But after that, I would probably do some writing. I'd go somewhere where it was peaceful and where I could write for.
So okay, this is a part of Ben.
Yeah,
I didn't know. Do you enjoy writing, or is that just something that you feel compelled to do?
I do. It's one of those things where it's easy for me. I can churn out papers very easily, and my wife looks at me like, "How in the world did you do that?" And I was just like, it's just a gift that God's given me.
It's because you're a great reader.
Well.
Yeah, reading leads to good writing.
But by God's grace. But I love to write, and if God implanted a book in my, not that we need more books, but I would want to write about how, and there are books that are out there, but how do people change? I'd want to write some kind of the combination of scientific, theories of human development, those kinds of things. Then you have the theological and the biblical understandings, and I just would love to. Write about that kind of thing.
Visit parks, write a book. You're 2 months in.
No. The book's gonna be about 6 months, and then I would want to do some kind of like they have these places where you can go learn for a semester at different places. Like I either want to go to like one of those seminaries in England, just so those just to go to Oxford for a semester and just learn from these brilliant minds. Or I would want to go to just visit some missions places where like God is doing stuff. Like I've always had this idea for a documentary. If I ever had like a film crew to do this, but like go to different places in the world and just ask one simple question to the populace: where do I find Christians? And see what people say. And what is the common vein that and how the world answers? Where do the Christians meet? Where do I find the Christians around here? And who they point to and why they point to them, I think would be very fascinating to see in today's modern world. So that's just...
You could open your own YouTube channel with that.
Yeah, maybe I could. But anyways, that's my idea.
Ben the influencer.
No. All right. Now I want to know how you would spend a year doing. Like, what would you do if you had a
lot
year?
of the same things you would do, minus the last thing. I love to write.
Yeah.
It's therapeutic for me. I really want to visit the national parks.
Yeah.
And I've always wanted to go and study in one of the English universities.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, there's just something. I mean, I spent a week in Oxford during my last sabbatical 7 years ago, or 8 years ago, and it was just like
nothing could make me drink because I'm committed to my abstinence. However, there's a part of me that would love to go to Oxford or Cambridge and go to class all day long and then go to the pub
and go to the Eagle and Child where Tolkien used to go and just sit there with professors and students and listen to the conversation. I get it.
But I would have to have what do they drink? What ale? I'd have to have an ale. Is that what they drink?
Well, ale is a kind of beer. There's many different kinds of beer.
Yeah, but pubs have beer, right?
Yeah.
Do they do hard liquor, or is it just like beer?
I'm sure you could get hard liquor if you wanted to, but typically they.
Thank
just
you
have
for educating me on the devil's den.
Not like I'm like an expert in this. I'm just aware of it. So okay, here's my next question for you. If you could replace the top of the Republican and Democrat ticket for two people you'd like to see,
this is easy. It won't take long.
Who would you put in front of the Republican and Democrat Take it.
DeSantis
Uh-huh.
with his running mate Haley or Tim Scott.
Okay.
Definite, no, not even close. Republican side, or Democrat side, Joe Manchin and Harold Ford Jr.
Oh.
Yep, those
Tell
really
us
easy.
about those people.
Joe Manchin and Harold Ford Jr. are two of the most reasonable Democrats I know.
They're classical Democrats.
They're classical
basically.
Democrats.
Yeah.
They would have been considered liberal years ago. Today, they're considered conservative Democrats.
Yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing I like about them. They're both nice people.
Yeah.
There's really nice people. And I feel the same way about, and people would debate you on this with DeSantis. I feel like DeSantis is a strong leader, and I would probably vote for him over I know I'd vote for him over the Democrats. But yeah, those are three Republicans I would vote for.
Okay.
And I don't find any Republicans today that I would vote for on that position on the ticket. And people know that and hate me for it.
Okay. All right. Fun. Yeah. All right.
Oh, my turn.
You're next.
I'm always surprised. It's Dan's turn.
Keep pitching to me, man.
All right, so this is a question because I talk to so many Gen Zers, and one of the first things almost in every conversation is they like to bring up some theological struggle they're having,
Yeah.
something about God that doesn't make sense. I had a conversation yesterday with an 18-year-old, and first question out of his mouth. So, what is your biggest theological struggle? A concept, an attribute, an unknown that makes you kind of lay awake at night and say, man, I just don't get how this works, or I don't understand this, or I don't like it.
I think one of the biggest things I struggle with right now is, and I grew up in a cessationist background, where basically it was like, there are no more miracles, there are no more, the sign gifts or anything like that. And I can't deny the reality of I see things around the world, especially Christians in third world countries, that speak of the supernatural acts of God in a way that they just have a very simple reading. Like I feel one of the one of the faults of the inheriting the Western. I mean, we have centuries of theological systems and Bible study and presuppositions. And I think sometimes people just read the Bible in these third world countries like, oh, this is what Jesus did, let's go out and do this. And then they do it, and you're like, wait a second, can you do that? So I think for me, my biggest question from right now that I wrestle with is, I'm not ready to say, like, I'm not a Pentecostal, I'm not a charismatic, because there's other things, like, I know I'm not, what I see that side, those tribes within Christianity, and I'm like, I'm not that. But I also look back at my past and I see the cessationist background, and I'm like, I don't think I'm that either. I'm not a guy who just believes that, we just come and there's just not a true expectation and a belief in the supernatural today. And how do we live that out? Like, what kind of expectation should we have for the supernatural happening in our world, in our lives? Does Jesus want us to go around and inviting people to be healed? Like those are things I wrestle with, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting you bring this up because literally I'm speaking on the book of Mark, probably in a passage in Mark chapter 1, verses 21. I changed your starting verse, 21 through 45, which is multiple cases of healings and casting out of demons.
Yes.
And so this is fresh on my mind because I'm a cessationist.
Yeah.
With just very small window of the supernatural.
Yeah.
The way but that's how I'm wired.
And so I feel like,
which is, you're a good influence on me in this area.
So I feel like if you leave this as the anchor of this cessationist belief,
it scares me.
It scares me, like, because I don't want to. I'm not interested in being the crazy charismatics. Like I look at them, and even biblically, I can point to and say, I just think that they have no anchor, and therefore that bothers me.
And intellectually, it's always dangerous to react to extremes.
Yeah.
Because then you shut off all the possibilities because you overreact.
Yeah. So I wrestle with, I've read some, especially in the realm of spiritual warfare. So you read about people doing spiritual war, just deliverance ministries. And again, I'm not like, when I say deliverance ministries, there are literally like probably 1,000 different versions of deliverance ministries when I say that. So don't take that I'm like interested in this.
Even the notion that there are deliverance ministries.
Yes.
Or deliverance movements.
And
which I see in Africa all the time, and they're always affiliated with the extreme charismatics and prosperity gospel people.
And I there's so much of that turns me off, but then I hear stories of people that actually do it and do it well, and I'm thinking, like, is there something to that we need to pay attention to? And is there a biblical way to address spiritual strongholds in people's lives. I think we just kind of like, we don't really talk about that within our tribe of evangelicalism. That's the part of the Christian experience I wrestle with, because I don't know, I don't have a home yet for where I'm at.
Yeah.
And so
and so I say this to people listening to this: don't let that cause you concern. Let that actually cause you comfort. Mm-hmm. It's part of our working out our salvation. Yeah. And even though we are pastors, there are concepts about God that are so incredible, so awesome, so beyond our scope of experience or intellect that we stand in amazement and confusion at times.
Yes.
And so will you.
Yeah. So I'm in the hallway right now.
Interesting.
And trying to decide what room I want to be in.
Just for fun, do you know what mine would be?
For you?
Yeah, because you know me.
Oh man.
Oh, come on. I thought you'd pop this out.
I think it might be the question I'm going to ask you, number 3.
Uh-oh. Okay.
Prayer.
Nope. That is a big one for me, though.
Yeah.
That one puts me under conviction. Just saying the word. Now I'm under conviction. No, for me, it is the whole predestination.
Yeah, that was probably.
The Reformed theology sends me down the dark hole of Christian fatalism so fast.
Yeah.
That it is like dropping into a black hole for me.
Yeah. Dan's like, I don't want to even touch it.
And then it affects my prayer life.
Yeah.
That's why I stopped reading some authors of the hyper-reformed, hyper-Calvinist vein when I was trying to educate myself, because it's like, well, why bother to pray?
Yeah.
Right. So,
which leads me to my third question for you, Dan. How would you advise someone who's struggling with God not answering their prayers?
I would say make an appointment with Ben Rudolph.
Who is on his way out of here?
Who's on a sabbatical for a year?
Catch him quick.
Good luck.
Because we always, there's a pastoral role to that, and I'm asking you, like, what would you say in a pastoral way? Because there's a theological conversation there, but
right, yeah. So a couple of quasi answers that kind of overlap a little bit. First of all, I would say continue in prayer. Even if you don't feel like it's doing it, because if you're praying to get something, then you're probably praying for the wrong reason anyway.
Yeah.
So, but in obedience, because blessings follow obedience, we're commanded to pray. The blessing may be different than what you anticipated. And so that's where you're going to have to release the results of your obedience. Sometimes obedience results in death.
Yeah.
It results in poverty.
Yeah.
The blessings that follow our obedience are not always how we would count blessings, which would be wealth, convenience, power, and so forth. That's a worldly way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Sometimes emptying yourself out and being, prostrate before God in absolute emptiness and is the blessing, and we don't even know it until we've experienced it. So I would say you have to be obedient in this area regardless. And then I would also say I would go through and study to make sure you actually know what prayer is all about, because a lot of us reduce prayer into I want. God give me.
Yeah.
And that's only a tiny, tiny fraction of prayer. And then the third thing is, and I talked about this Sunday, and I just had a great conversation with a good man today in my office who is being pursued heavily by God. I hope he's listening to this, because I told him this, and he'll know I'm talking about him when I say this. But I said this Sunday at the end of my sermon, and I said, use the time like we have in the service, that 60, 90 seconds. Use time in your day to shut up and listen from God, because prayer ought not be a monologue. It ought to be a dialogue. Yeah. And often we don't hear from God because we're too busy talking.
Yeah.
So that's how I would.
Okay. All right. Your turn. My last question.
Oh, man. These are both really good questions. So I've done, there's 3 domains in learning. There's the cognitive, what you know. So I've already done that one about your theological struggle. And then there's the psychomotor. That's what you're doing. So we've already talked about what would you do if you had a year. So now I'm going to go to the affective domain.
Okay.
That's attitudinal.
Okay.
Reflects your heart.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you give yourself an attitude adjustment whenever you're just struggling in that department? How do you reset yourself when you're anxious or depressed or angry or hopeless, or and you just know this is attitudinal, that you're right now your beliefs are weak?
Yeah. So I would say I talk to my wife I mean, I just share my heart, and I just vomit everything. This is what I'm thinking. And my wife is like such a good reader of people's energy. You know what I mean? Like, I can walk in and be like, she's like, "What's wrong?" And I'm like, "Nothing's wrong." She's like, "Yes, there is." And I'm like, "Yeah, there is." So, I mean, just kind of talking about it, there is something about verbalizing what's internal that's why people do go to therapists, and like they vomit out what's going on and they feel better. Even if nothing else changed in their life, they just being able to express and talk about has been helpful. So that's one. Number two, I have to listen to God. And one of the things that, just that meditation, that silence, that two-way communication, I need that. Like God gave me a little bit of a spanking the other day because, I did something I shouldn't have done, and I was just beating myself up. I mean, I am such my inner critic voice is really strong, Dan. Mm-hmm. It's very, very strong. And so when I do something that I look back, I just beat myself up. And God was just like, "Why do you show people so much grace?" Like, if people come in your office and are like, "Man, I messed up here," I'm like the most gracious person to just be kind and just invite them into God's grace. And he's like, why can't you show yourself the same kind of grace? And I was like, "I don't know." He's like, "Because you're proud. Because you think..."
Oh, didn't see that one coming.
Because you think you shouldn't mess up. You think that you like when you have these people that are hyper critical, high, of themselves, what you're basically saying is, I expect everyone else to mess up, but not me. And so there's this, I have to confront this reality of, I will continue to make mistakes for the rest of my life. My posture, one of my core convictions in life is always learning, always growing. Always learning, always growing. And so if I'm always learning, always growing, then there's going to be things I need to learn and grow in. Even at whether I'm 40, like I'm 48 right now, or whether I'm 65, or whether, it doesn't matter. I'm always going to be learning and growing. And if I have the posture of I'm always learning and growing, then I should humble myself and show myself kindness and grace when I do mess up, because that's really important. The third thing, that's just a very simple thing that I do, is I go for a walk.
And I've seen you do that many times.
There are, walking is actually a very regulating thing to do for your brain. It moves your bilateral stimulus in your brain. You're moving both arms back and forth. You're looking side to side. And what ends up happening is you can regulate and actually it starts putting your thoughts in your prefrontal cortex as opposed to your amygdala. And so, yeah, that's just, go for a walk sometimes is really helpful.
It's cool.
Those are my
Man,
three.
I wished I had time to unpack that. And I probably am going to unpack a little bit after we turn this microphone off, because I got other theories. I mean, not contradictory.
What do you mean unpack that?
Particularly the part about grace.
Yeah.
I think a lot of pastors are hard on themselves because they know everybody else is going to be harder on them.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the judgment and criticism. So one of my, I have this routine that I do every single morning with God. It's a 45-minute routine that I do every single day. And it's my prayer walk, and I pray the same things. And one of the things that I do when I'm praying is I get to this point in my prayer where I talk about fear. And I in my prayer walk, I motion with my hands, because I say, "God, I release all fear to you today." And I have all these fears that I release to him. And there's like 5 major fears that I have in my life that I can look back and I can pinpoint 5 major fears that have influence. Because I think none of us are really fully aware of how much fear dictates to us our choices in life. Mm-hmm. And one of those fears is judgment and criticism. Mm-hmm. And so God, I release, this is my prayer almost every day. God, I release to you all fear of judgment and criticism. Because God, number one, you are the only one who can tell me who I am. You're the only one that can tell me when I've messed up. And Jesus, you are the one who received ultimate judgment and criticism from others for righteousness. Therefore, I can release any fear of judgment and criticism to you. Yep. So I do that every day. And so I do that every day because I know the tendency of my flesh to fall back into a fear of judgment and criticism.
Dude. You can't do that 2 minutes after our time is over.
That was
and
really
you've got
good.
4 more to go. So I am writing in my little black book. This is a future episode.
Yeah.
All right. This is a powerful one.
Okay.
Yes.
You don't even know how powerful it is, but that's a very powerful one.
Okay.
So
praise the
that
Lord.
was a really great 2 minutes.
All right.
So, all right. Well, as always.
Wait, I'm the one. I started.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
This whole
You're supposed to close.
episode, Dan has been like, "What's next?"
And then I try to close it.
He takes the microphone from me at the end.
I'm so sorry.
Oh, Dan, I love you. I love you, Dan.
You don't have very many more of these days.
All right. Now, listen. Here's what I would like. If you're listening to this and you want to ask 3 questions of Dan and I, email us at lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com. That's
And hurry.
lifetalks@lifecharlotte.com.
Do it quick.
Email us some questions you'd love for us to answer. We love doing these kinds of episodes.
8 weeks.
Stop it, Dan. Let me enjoy this moment.
I'm just sitting over here, and then the mics will go off, and I'll just cry in 8 weeks.
Thanks again for joining us on Life Talks. We'll talk to you next time.